Perfect. That better?
And then can you zoom in a little bit, please? Because it seems very far.
Yeah, absolutely. Is that better?
Maybe 2 more clicks. I think so.
Okay. How's that looking to everyone? This is the joy of having a 49-inch monitor. So great question. I would suggest keeping Codio open because we are going to be going over some exercises, but don't be afraid to focus more on the lesson, right? Especially on today's lesson, it's really going to be going over some concepts. There will be some hands-on, but if it's easier for you to just listen and take notes, you're more than allowed to do that as well. Once we get into coding, though, I definitely recommend getting a little bit more hands-on, right? You're not really going to get that immersion unless you're coding along with the lesson. So great question. Okay, so thank you, Yvonne. So going back to what we were going over, again, there's going to be a couple of things we're focusing on today. So again, going over the architecture of the World Wide Web, we're going to be explaining roles of what web browsers and servers do, and then really start diving into the basic principles of web development. So let's do a little bit of a kind of a pop quiz, trivia quiz here, okay? So none of these are graded, so don't worry about that. But we're gonna go over and just kind of see like how much do we really know about the internet we're spending our days on. So the first question, what was the first website ever created? And go ahead and throw your guesses in the chat. And once we have a few answers, we'll go ahead and see what the answer is. So a music sharing site, online bookstore, website about the World Wide Web project, or a social media platform. Looks like everyone's coming in with C. Now here's the question. Who knew that before checking the answer? No, it's the answer is C. So the world's first website was created by Tim Berners-Lee, who we're going to be learning a little bit more here shortly. But it was going to be just focused solely on the World Wide Web project. Okay. Next question. What was the name of the first search engine? We have Google, Archie, Yahoo, or Alta Vista. Okay, we've got a D, some B's. We've got Archie. The answer is B. So the first engine was called Archie. Does anyone remember what FTP is? Anyone had any experience with that file transfer protocol? If so, that means you've been around for a while. So that definitely takes me back. Oop. And last year, how many websites existed by 2021? This is pretty crazy when you think about it. The answer is going to be C, 1.7 billion sites. Now, obviously, not everything's active, right? I actually still have some old websites I designed that if you really search on Google, you can find from 25 years ago, but obviously not active. It's just the cached in there. So as we go in, by the way, just if you have any questions, make sure that there's really two things I want to suggest is write it down, okay? And we can always go over questions at the end. Veronica can attest to this, but 9 times out of 10, if you have a question about something we've gone over, we're probably going to cover it. But if we don't cover it, we can either go over it at the end, or if you do ask the question, then Veronica will answer that in the chat for you, okay? But again, just don't get too hung up on if something doesn't make sense. We'll have plenty of time to go over that here at the end. And last question, what was the subject of the first image ever uploaded to the web? I'm seeing a few different answers here, which means that people are actually guessing. That's awesome. The answer is B. It was a photo of the band Les Horribles Cernetes. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but it's a comedy band. So back in 1992, I was 3 years old. That takes me back. And last question here. As of 2023, which is the largest website in terms of pages? We got some D's flowing in. It is the Wayback Machine. Who here has actually spent some time in the Wayback Machine before today's class? I'm curious. Yeah, it's an incredible piece of technology. I I use it sometimes whenever like the music that I used to play, sometimes I want to go back and see like old reviews that people left about our album, and that's really the only way I can grab them because the sites aren't active anymore. All right. So the internet. Obviously, we all know what the internet is, right? We've been on it, we use it, we're on it right now, right? But there's a difference between the World Wide Web and the internet. So the internet is the actual network that keeps all the computers communicating, right? It's think of it as a how we had the pony like in the United States we would have what's called the Pony Express, right? Mail, and that was a network of sorts. So now we have the internet. It's a way for me to be able to communicate to you. You can communicate to someone in Australia, et cetera. It's all over the place, right? And it's something that's been around for a while now. It's something that, since the 1960s, which was the US Department of Defense, that was the way for them to be able to pass information back and forth. So it's been around for a while, but that's not the World Wide Web. So let's go over the internet a little bit here. We've got a few minutes on this video, okay?
This wonderful
And I'm going to go ahead and start playing it. Let me know if you can hear it, okay?
including Netscape Navigator in 1994. This became the most popular web browser at the time, accounting for 90% of the web usage in 1995. In the early 90s, companies like AOL and CompuServe were starting to provide dial-up internet access. Dial-up is a method of connecting to the internet via a telephone line. Your telephone line was plugged into a modem and the other end was plugged into the phone jack. There was a period in history where you couldn't use your telephone and the internet at the same time. Without the internet, we obviously wouldn't have things like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, but way more importantly, we wouldn't be able to access information in seconds. We wouldn't be able to communicate with people from around the world, share ideas, and educate those who might not get a chance elsewhere. Also, without the internet, I'd actually have to talk to someone when I order a pizza, which, by the way, was the first thing ever purchased on the internet. How would your life be different without the internet? Let us know in the comment section below. This episode of Life Noggin is brought to you by Audible. Go to audible.com/
I don't know about y'all, but I had numerous instances where I would try to get on the internet and have to wait for someone to get off the phone, or I'm on the internet and my mom would be trying to call in from work, unable to reach me because I was on the internet. So it is interesting. We don't have to worry about that anymore. And we have people who will never have to deal with that. But so the World Wide Web, again, it's a service that's going to utilize the internet, and then it's think of it as just a giant database, right? Of whether it's videos, documents, images, different websites that help take you back and forth to really see whatever you want to see, right? So, but the benefit of the World Wide Web now is the experience, right? And we're going to see what the World Wide Web really like some browsers looked like before, but it's definitely not how it was now, right? Where it's so easy, whether you're going to Google, all of our different social media websites, it's very user friendly. That is the focus. But in the beginning, we didn't have that luxury, right? It was just, how do we make this work? Think of it as the biggest MVP, or minimally viable product of all time. So now we're going to watch this quick video about the World Wide Web.
The World Wide Web, where you're likely watching this video, is used by millions of people every day for everything from checking the weather, ordering food, and chatting with friends, to raising funds, sharing news, or starting revolutions. We use it from our computers, our phones, even our cars. It's just there, all around us, all the time. But what is it exactly? Well, first of all, the World Wide Web is not the internet, even though the terms are often used interchangeably. The internet is simply the way computers connect to each other in order to share information. When the internet first emerged, computers actually made direct calls to each other. Today, networks are all around us, so computers can communicate seamlessly. The communication enabled through the internet has many uses, such as email, file transfer, and conferencing. But the most common use is accessing the World Wide Web. Think of the web as a bunch of skyscrapers, each representing a web server, a computer always connected to the internet, specifically designed to store information and share it. When someone starts a website, they are renting a room in this skyscraper, filling it with information and linking that information together in an organized way for others to access. The people who own these skyscrapers and rent space in them are called web hosts, but anyone can set up a web server with the right equipment and a bit of know-how. There's another part to having a website without which we would be lost in the city with no way of finding what we need. This is the website address, which consists of domain names. Just like with a real-life address, a website address lets you get where you want to go. The information stored in the websites is in web languages, such as HTML and JavaScript. When we find the website we're looking for, our web browser is able to take all the code on the site and turn it into words, graphics, and videos. We don't need to know any special computer languages because the web browser creates a graphic interface for us. So in a lot of ways, the World Wide Web is a big virtual city where we communicate with each other in web languages, with browsers acting as our translators. And just like no one owns a city, no one owns the web. It belongs to all of us. Anyone can move in and set up shop. We might have to pay an internet service provider to gain access, a hosting company to rent web space, or a registrar to reserve our web address. Like utility companies in a city, these companies provide crucial services, but in the end, not even they own the web. But what really makes the web so special lies in its very name. Prior to the web, we used to consume most information in a linear fashion. In a book or newspaper article, each sentence was read from beginning to end, page by page, in a straight line until you reached the end. But that isn't how our brains actually work. Each of our thoughts is linked to other thoughts, memories, and emotions in a loose, interconnected network, like a web. Tim Berners-Lee, the father of the World Wide Web, understood that we needed a way to organize information that mirrored this natural arrangement. And the web accomplishes this through hyperlinks. By linking several pages within a website or even redirecting you to other websites to expand on information or ideas immediately as you encounter them, hyperlinks allow the web to operate along the same lines as our thought patterns. The web is so much a part of our lives because in content and structure, it reflects both the wider society and our individual minds. And it connects those minds across all boundaries, not only ethnicity, gender, and age, but even time and space.
All right. So we've heard the name Tim Berners-Lee a few times. Okay, so he was a computer scientist at CERN, or European Organization for Nuclear Research, which the acronym CERN is actually from the French name of the organization. So they're trying to figure out how can we take all of this information that we have and how can we connect it, right? How can we easily access things that may be loosely related, but still related? And how can we do this easily? Again, now we take things for granted, right? Whether it's Google, Facebook, Instagram, all these things that are just user tested over and over and over. At this point, they didn't have that luxury. They just had to figure out how to make this work. So in 1991, the first actual website went live. And all it was a page of text describing this project. But if you think about it, that makes sense, right? It's one of the first instances of online documentation. But after that, people started realizing, hey, there's a lot of potential here, not just for information, but for money. So now it started to become more public. Now we started seeing more businesses and companies getting involved. And again, things were pretty simple, right? It was mostly just text, very basic imagery, but people started seeing, okay, this is a big deal and let's get on board. Let's figure out how to make this World Wide Web a thing. So when we go to this next page here, this is the first website on the World Wide Web. Actually, back in 2013, they decided to recreate it, which, since this is only HTML, which we'll get into here shortly, pretty easy, right? They didn't have to add a lot here. So feel free to click around, right? But just something to think about. And I would love to hear if you have any thoughts in the chat, please drop them. Or if you want to unmute, you're more than welcome to do that as well. But think about when you're looking at this website, what are the things that you notice that are different here compared to what we see on a daily basis? And that could be a good or a bad thing, right? Is there something here that you see and you're like, man, I wish I saw this more often? Or do you think this is something that we should leave completely in the past? But not only that, think about the simplicity here. How do you think this set the groundwork for everything moving forward? Because again, this is the very first website. So everything built off of this. And then furthermore, when we look at this website, for example, you can look here talking about how to do file transfer protocol, how to get code. What do we see here that sets the goals for everything moving forward? So I'm curious to see what we've got here in the chat. I see a few people typing. Give me a chance to take a drink. No pictures. Absolutely. Because at this point, you think about it, images weren't optimized yet, right? So for example, there's a file format now called WebP, which is one of the most like optimized images you can have on a website. It's really what Google Images has transitioned, or Google's requested most websites to use this now because they're so easy to access. But then back then, those images were so big that you'd wait forever for it to load. So there's no point in adding that. Joseph said, I can see a number of links. Absolutely, right? This is the whole project here is how can you link different documents together? So you can look here on help, right? And it'll tell you, okay, well, which program are you using, right? Or which browser. So here it gives you the option to click on which browser you're looking at to get more information. This is that benefit of that web. It's spreading out. We see very basic, no images, one type of font. Yep, perfect. I love everything coming through here. Tatiana mentioned, I remember waiting hours or a couple of days to download pictures. Yes. If anyone used websites like Napster, LimeWire, anything like that, not only were you waiting for days, but you were praying that you got the right file. I can't tell you how many times I'd download an album, completely different artist, but you didn't know back then. So, but yes, great feedback. Thank you everyone for jumping in here. So what is a browser, right? It's a window. It's a way to jump into the World Wide Web and be able to access everything. What's interesting is the browser does all of the hard work for us. So if you remember in that video, it said that we didn't have to know fancy programming languages to view the website, to view the World Wide Web, right? That's what the browser does. It can take all of the languages that these websites are made with and display them for us, which is amazing when you think about it, right? A tool that can go through and visit almost anything on the internet and display it for us. Now, as we'll learn, the difficulty is, well, how do you develop a website that works on every browser? And anyone who's used Safari knows that, well, it doesn't work the way that you think it does. But again, as we see here at the end, the browser engine interprets that code, and then it determines how to display the content on our screens. So let's go ahead, let's explore the first browser here, right? And this is zoomed in a little bit, so it looks not so pretty, but on your end, it should look a lot better. So back in 1990, we talked about CERN, right? The World Wide Web was developed on what's called a Next computer. And I'm not going to pretend that I've ever used one of those. That was way before my time. But back in 2019, a bunch of people got together and, well, how can we recreate this first browser? So we can see here, well, this actually isn't that bad, right? You can drag your windows around. You know, you've got a pretty decent graphical user interface, right? Everything's here that you need to use. Now, it doesn't mean it looks good according to today's standards, but that's the point. That's today's standards. This is where we're at back then. Now, if you notice here, the kind of annoying thing is you don't really know, like, unless you're looking here, like, okay, you can click on these arrows, but I click on style. Now I want to click print, but I can't till I close that, right? But, you know, we can go through here and let's go through these steps. So we'll, on the side menu, we'll click document. Let's see, open from full document reference. Okay. And then see, again, it's a little clunky here. And then on the reference, let's see if we can make anything work. I don't think, Google's not gonna work, right? But let's see what happens. Nope, it did not work, which is to be expected, right? We're not gonna have a website that works now. Can anyone think of a website that may have existed back in 1990? I would be surprised if we find the one that does. Terra, okay. That one did not work either. US Gov. All right, we'll try one more here. Now the question is it going to be us.gov? That one didn't work. But the point is, I mean, it's working as expected, right? And something interesting, we'll get into that when we get into actual web development. But this is a great example of what we call error handling. So don't want to get too in the weeds here, but instead of just a blank window, we actually see text that says, nope, not found. So already they were doing their job of programming that in. Now, in 1992, we start seeing what's called a line mode browser, which if you've done any coding or you've worked in the terminal, this should look pretty familiar. It looks like it's from the Matrix, right? But what we see here is even though this only worked on Next computers, what we find is, well, this is actually a little bit more universal, right? Because the basic interface here, yes, it's simple in design, but this allows people to kind of start doing more complicated tasks. Because if you go here, if I type help, I think it's actually, what's interesting is it says help and it's capital H. I forgot it's a lowercase h. So, but you see here, it actually gives you a full list of everything you can do. And that's very similar to what we see with terminals now, right? And this doesn't, I'm trying to think of a good way to put it. This allows people to kind of get in and start doing their own things instead of being relegated to what the graphical interface would tell you. Only numbers are working on this website. Yep. And what's interesting, if you try to quit, you'll get a pop-up that says, I'm not a quitter. I thought that was pretty funny. So again, this isn't something we're going to be seeing now, right? This was back in the 90s, but just as really as a snapshot of where we've come, even in the past 30 years. So today there's a handful of browsers that most people are going to use. So I would love to hear in the chat which browsers y'all are using, but the main ones are Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Edge, and Opera. Now, the interesting thing is Chrome is 100% dominating the market. And it's not even because of the browser itself, but as we see on point 4, Edge is what we call a Chromium browser. For example, the browser I'm using right now is called Brave, which is a Chromium browser. It takes the framework, the foundation of Chrome, and people are able to build on top of it. I think it says a lot that Microsoft themselves would rather take that Chromium engine and build their own browser on top of it instead of building something on their own from scratch, which I don't know if anyone here has had experiences with developing for Internet Explorer, but I did not cry any tears when they stopped updating that. That was, apart from Safari, one of the biggest headaches for development. But it seems like most people are using Chrome. Looks like someone uses Firefox for work. Yeah, Firefox it's a very robust browser, as it says here. A lot of people have realized it's very invested in the open source community. So, for example, we see what's MDN, which we're going to get into later. But MDN is Mozilla Developer Network, and hands down the best open source resource for web development. So if you want to learn anything about JavaScript, HTML, CSS, and you kind of want to get more of like official documentation, like I 100% recommend MDN over W3 schools, anything like that. Your mileage may vary, of course, but just from my experience, it's been great. Now, Opera used to be a big deal because it has a built-in VPN, right? But nowadays, you don't really need that anymore because people either have their own VPN or other browsers are offering that. But it really was state of the art at the time. Now, when we get into web servers, this is where we start understanding that idea of a skyscraper, right? Where you rent out a space to host your website. This is something that really, as we start moving over to like cloud servers and everything, at the end of the day, it's still a computer somewhere that allows these websites to be utilized throughout the World Wide Web. Now, whenever you type your address into a browser, that's when we start seeing what's called HTTP or HTTPS, which is Hypertext Transfer Protocol. So you make a request from the server to the internet, or the client would go to the internet, make the request, it hits the server, and then it circles back around. And from the image, it seems like, well, is that really the most efficient way to handle things, right? There's a couple of people involved, but at this point, I don't think we really have a better option. So, then maybe that's something you want to figure out, right? How could we make this more streamlined? But really, it's a pretty well-oiled machine at this point. And, something to understand too is every server has its own unique address, which is called an IP address. And as you get in development, for example, you'll notice things like, for example, I'm working on a feature right now for my job where if someone, like, who here has utilized a feature that says like use current location, whether it's on your phone or the computer, and all of a sudden, boom, your zip code or something like that appears. What happens there is whether you're on a phone or the internet, it makes a request and it gets your IP address. And then it converts that IP address to an object, which we'll get into later, and it'll have your address, your zip code, all this other stuff. And that's where your zip code would appear in that field, right? So when you click current location, all it's doing is getting your IP address, which I thought was really interesting once I started having to dive into it. So getting into this little infographic here, we're going to break down the anatomy of what a URL is, okay? So you'll notice here, even the Wikipedia, we're looking at a URL in Wikipedia. So we have a couple different pieces here. We have what's called a protocol, a domain, a path, and a web page. So the protocol is going to be either HTTP or HTTPS, followed by a colon and 2 forward slashes. So we talked about that on the previous page. Did anyone catch what the S stands for in HTTPS? Let's see, we've got a few people typing here. Secure. Yep. So you'll find a lot of websites are transitioning over there, but it's just an extra level of security, right? Just to make sure the information you're providing to this website is going to be handled appropriately. And you can't have that without ensuring that you've taken those steps. So moving after that, we have the domain here with the teal color. And that's really just, it's to think about earlier is kind of your postal address, right? Of saying, hey, this is where this website lives. So I couldn't tell you that my website lives at en.wikipedia.org, right? That's not my domain. That's not my home. I cannot put my website there. Then we have what's called the path, right? So we'll get into what's called folder structures. But if you think about your computer, right, and if you've ever had to access a file, if you have Windows, for example, you'd have C, right, C:// and then maybe users / and then it goes on till you find the file you're looking for. That's what a path is, right? Each subset. So we could have in.wikipedia.org/wiki/docs/images, however many we want, right? And each of those little what you might call slug or section is called a path, because it's a subfolder to where this web page is actually located. And then the last part here is the actual web page. So years ago, you would have to have a file extension for that web page. Does anyone remember like what that might look like? So you might see like, www.catswithhats.com/index. Does anyone remember what file extension we might see there? .html, right? And for a while, it used to even just be .htm. So, but now a lot of these web pages are able to drop that because it's assumed everything's going to be HTML. Now, if you access an actual file, like an XML file, a TXT file, all of those still have to be there. Speaking of HTML, imagine that. So HTML is what is the foundational language of the web. So we'll get into this more, but there's really two analogies to help understand how web pages are made up. And I'll explain it once we go through everything. But the HTML is really the foundation, the skeleton of a website. So as we can see here in the middle tab, we have a bunch of pseudo words, really. HTML isn't a word, right? Doc type isn't technically a word, but we have these words surrounded with these angle brackets. And what this is a way to tell the World Wide Web, the internet, right? Each of those things, again, it's so easy to interchange those. I even struggle with that. But what we're saying is, hey, what's inside of here, it's going to be something in particular, right? And what I mean by that is we have this HTML tag. And imagine this as like a sandwich, right? So we have this opening one here, the top loaf or the top piece on line 2, and then the bottom piece on line 21. And all of this code gets sandwiched in between because we want this to be HTML, right? So if you want to kind of explore here on Codio, by the way, you can click this little blue arrow and it'll actually open up in a new window or a new tab. So we see here it says my web page, right? So speaking of sandwiches, I'll put I am hungry because I did not eat lunch. I could go here and refresh, and you see here up in the top tab, it actually updated and said I am hungry because I did not eat lunch. Because this is what's called a title tag, okay? So again, we're going to get into more of this later. But each of these tags does something different to the website. For example, we have an H1 here, which is called a header element. Nice thing about Codio is if you hover over each of those, you notice here MDN reference, right? I was telling you, it's a big deal. But it'll actually give you an idea of what each of these tags does. So then I could change here and say, I have only drank energy drinks today, and that was a bad decision. I hit refresh. Again, it updates here. So just to reiterate, the HTML is the structure of the website, whether that's images, text, not so much the styling, because we're going to get on to that on the next page. And remember, if you have any questions about what we've gone over, feel free to drop them in the chat. Veronica will handle those as they come up. Now we have what's called CSS. So if the HTML was the structure of a web page, the CSS is kind of like the paint, right? So if you think about a house, the HTML would be the foundation, I'm not really like the wood, right? The skeleton of the house, excuse me. And then the CSS is like the paint, right? How you want to dress up the house. Maybe it's going to be the blinds, or maybe the carpet. It's a way to make the house look unique. So the CSS is a way to style the World Wide Web. So we take that HTML and we add what's called CSS. So there are hundreds of different CSS styles that we can use. For example, font family, margin, padding, right? So if I went in here, I did Comic Sans, and then I hit refresh. I forget you'd actually have to download that. So let's do something different here. We can do background color. Let's do FF0000. I hit refresh. All of a sudden now we have a really not looking great website with a red background. That's where the CSS comes into play. So what we have is we have what's called a selector, okay? And then inside of these curly braces, we have the different styles that we want to apply to that specific selector. So don't worry so much about the specifics here. We're going to do a deep dive of CSS here shortly. But what's awesome is with CSS, we can start customizing not just how the web page looks from a stylistic standpoint, like color and text, but we can change the format as well. So we have things such as Flexbox, okay? So you might have seen, which there's like here, right? So I'm sure you've seen web pages like this where you have like a header here, you have some sidebars, the main content. Blogs are notorious for having layouts like this. This is done with what's called Flexbox. So CSS really gives you the ability to make your web page, well, its own thing. And then last we have JavaScript, okay? And oh, that color stayed. Should have reset that. So the JavaScript, if the HTML was the foundation, if the CSS was the styling, then JavaScript is like the utilities. How do you make the house do things? Or if you want to go from a grammar standpoint, HTML would be a noun, the CSS would be an adjective, and then the JavaScript would be a verb, right? So how do you make the web page do things? And this is a pretty simple example, but if I was to click this About Me section, or if you clicked it as well, you'll see this pop up that says you click the About Me section. So what it's doing is we have what are called events, and an event is fired, right? And if you listen for that event, you can do something. Now, what's awesome is you can change the CSS with JavaScript. You can create elements in HTML with JavaScript. So we're going to get into that. And this is my personal favorite part of web development, is what you'd call DOM manipulation. And we'll learn about that. But as you start getting into JavaScript more, you'll find out it's not just how you design a website, but you can also create servers with JavaScript as well, which is called Node.js. And there's a couple other variations as well. I'm curious if anyone has had experience with any of that, but JavaScript is very versatile, which is why we're going to spend so much time learning about it. Okay, so we have reached about an hour, which is awesome. So I'm going to go ahead. Let's do our full 10-minute break. Yvonne, do you have any concerns with that, or you think that's good here?
No, I think this is great.
Okay, awesome. Well, you are going to learn this 10-minute study timer is going to get stuck in your head. I apologize in advance. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play here, and we will meet back. Let's see. What time is it currently for y'all? I don't have the international calendar in front of me, but we'll just meet back in 10 minutes.
Yeah, we'll meet 1 minute after the hour.
Perfect. There we go. Thank you. All right. And I had some people ask about the lizards. Here is the only one that's awake right now. His name's Gene, bearded dragon. He's got a lot of sass, but he's a cool guy. So, all right, back to your home. Okay. So we are on our first official lab. And these labs are going to be hands-on assignments that we're going to have for nearly every lesson. So if you have not opened up Codio, I highly recommend that we do that now. It's a lot easier to do this together instead of having to do this later. But again, if it's easier for you to just focus, that's totally fine. Something else I wanted to reiterate too is even though we do have a smaller group, if it's easier for you to not have Slack open, that's okay too. But just be aware, sometimes we will be sharing stuff in the chat. So we talked earlier about the largest web page collection, and we talked about how it's the Internet Archive, the Wayback Machine. So I don't know if you all have actually used just the regular archive portion, but there's a lot of great stuff on here. Not just previous web pages, right? But there's legitimately free books that you can find that are legally available. I've found old movies on here too. There's some really good like jazz albums on here. I mean, there's just so much stuff. So what we're going to be doing though is utilizing the Wayback Machine, and we're going to be looking at how Amazon, imagine that, the way that they've changed over the course of the past roughly 25 years. So as we go through and you look at those changes, what we're going to talk about is, well, were these changes good? What could they have done differently? And really be thinking about not just Amazon, but how we are going to be learning how to handle a user experience and user interface over the next several months. So the early internet era, this is really Amazon in the beginning, right? And obviously some variations, but this is, I don't know about y'all, but I remember this. And there's a lot going on here. It's this would not be easy to view on a mobile device at all. And something we can actually go over really quick is if we want to open up a new window here, and if you're on your computer, you could right click and go to inspect. There's something here, and we'll go over it more later, but there's a device toolbar, right? And you could actually look to see how this would look on a mobile device. And as you can see here, this is not optimized for mobile devices because back in 2000, no one was really browsing the internet on their phone. So as we go over this assignment, I'm going to give everyone a few minutes. So let's go ahead and start filling out some of these questions, right? And we'll go over it together. This is not something you feel like you have to do on your own, but I would love to start hearing some stuff in the chat as well. So let's go over the first question here. So describe the design and layout of Amazon in 2000. What's standing out here in regards to how the website was designed and how the website would be utilized by users? And I am going to open it up if it's easier. If you'd like to chat over Zoom, we can do that as well. Not required, but we have a small group here, so we can definitely do that. Texts and lots of texts. Yes, you're reading a book to purchase a book, right? Yvonne says it's cluttered. I mean, that's very true. It is. There's not, I mean, we have white space because of the background, but there's not a lot of room for anything to breathe, right? They're really utilizing every piece of real estate here. Zartasha said in 2000, the design was basic with a clean white background. Yeah, I mean, I'm actually a really big fan of simplistic aesthetics when it comes to web design. So white backgrounds, I'm always on board with, right? Only books. Yeah, you do have the DVD and video section here, right? But on the main page, yeah, all you're seeing is books. Way too many menus. So that's interesting, right? Because if you were to go to Amazon now, you would have what's called like a hamburger menu, which is the 3 lines. You could click on that and gives you the drop down. So it stays out of the way, but here the menu's front and center, right? And it is a bit cluttered because of that. Let's see what else. The positives, they do mention Harry Potter in there. Yeah, I actually waited in line for the last book to come out. I was really excited about that one. Let's see, bullet points seems to have been a big thing. Yes, so what's interesting with CSS is you can hide the bullet points or you can do different things with them, but list items, as we'll see here, are still very utilized in web pages. You just may not see the bullet points visibly, right? They're maybe hidden with CSS. Let's see what else we got here. It focused on easy navigation, clear products listings, and user reviews. Yeah, so I think the thing that is overlooked here is at the time, this would have been viewed as pretty easy navigation. So if we go to the welcome page, which should be archived here, my internet's a little slow too. Yep, there we go. So it really does give you a lot of the main categories here, right? So at the time, they didn't have a whole lot. So it makes sense to have everything spelled out like this, right? And again, having these sections up here, I would say that's kind of redundant though, right? Is you have your navigation up here, but then you have your navigation here on the left too, right? And they really do have a lot here that they're trying to put in front of you, right? These special features, shopping services. But I will say, speaking from experience, this does not feel intrusive, right? Where nowadays everything, someone mentioned earlier, the early internet did not have invasive ads, which is true. And here you don't see a lot that's trying to get you or trying to monopolize your attention, right? The goal really seems to, how do we get you to the place that you need to be? Whereas current websites are, well, how can we keep you on our website as long as possible? So great feedback. So again, make sure you're filling this out in the, we also didn't have cookies. Make sure you're filling this out in the answer section here too, okay? So number 2, let's identify features or elements typical of websites from the early 2000s. So I think we've kind of covered this, right? But something I've noticed here is, again, you have multiple nav bars, right? Or multiple menus. I don't know why that was a thing instead of just having it in one place, but that was very commonplace in the early 2000s is having multiple menus. Also very small images, right? None of these images are big because most people were on dial-up. So you had to be cognizant of the fact that the bigger the images, the longer a website takes to load. The longer a website takes to load, the less likely someone is to go to your website. What else are we noticing here from the early 2000s that this Amazon site is exemplifying? And I just keep focusing on Yvonne talking about cookies. Man, this is the wrong time to be hungry. You dropping stuff like that. Hyperlinks are very obvious. Yes, all the hyperlinks are blue, right? Which is, well, standard is if you have a hyperlink, that's, I don't know if it's this exact shade of blue. I'm not going to say it is, but this normal, right, is it's blue and it's underlined. Whereas, like Drago said, it's, you can sometimes see hyperlinks without any styling on it at all, which I would argue is not a good thing, right? Is you should make it clear if something is clickable. So this here, there's no questions about, can I click on something? Does it take me somewhere else? Horrible font. Yeah, I mean, I'll say it's inconsistent, right? So we have one font style here, another font style here, another font style here, another font style here. There's a lack of consistency for sure. I don't know if I'd go as far as to say it's horrible, but it's that consistency is something that I think a lot of web designers at the time, it just wasn't on their radar. Obvious that information was more important than design. Exactly. It was about how do we get you to where you need to be, almost to the detriment of information overload, right? Tatiana says, let's say hard to watch. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I would say as long as it's not Comic Sans or if you've ever seen Bleeding Cowboy, those two fonts are horrible. So we don't see any of that. So that's good. Amazon Ember wasn't invented. I'm actually not familiar with what that is. It rings a bell. I know Ember is a framework. Oh, it's a font. Interesting. Is that Amazon's font here? Let's take a look at what it looks like. Oh, gotcha. Yeah, I recognize that. Even though it disappeared on me. Huh. Yeah, that makes sense. Having that consistent branding, right? A lot of companies now they'll use it's a Google font called like Poppins or Roboto, but again, having that consistency is really big. All right, and then let's look at the last question here. So, how user-friendly is the site in terms of navigation, product listings, and categories? So, what I want to challenge you is let's not think about user-friendly now, right? Let's think about user-friendly back then, where dial-up, right? Most people didn't have broadband or cable internet or satellite or anything really high speed, right? Most people were very hobbled by internet speeds. So Tatiana says really easy to navigate and well organized for that time. Yeah, I would agree. There's no confusion in where to go on this site. Diego says no pictures, partially because not all the images got archived. But we do see that there are a few images, right? Looks like there was one that's supposed to be Diablo 2, something for Z Shops. I have no idea what that is. But we see this Anthony Bourdain photo image. But like, let's compare it, right, to where we're at now. And we'll get there, but like it's images galore. And as you can see here, I've been trying to find a copy of the Metroid trilogy on the Wii U. Have not had any luck. But yeah, there's no really text here, right? They assume that you're going to know what it is just by looking at the image, which is a complete contrast now or then where it's all text and very limited images. Zartasha says less user-friendly, limited drop-down menu. Yep, because really at this point, mobile was not a thing for web develop or for browsing, right? So you wouldn't really need to worry about a drop-down menu because I mean, pretty much everyone had the same square box monitor, right? So they weren't designing for different viewports, as we'll learn about. No need to search a lot; just go straight to what you want, right? Yeah, and it gives you the option to search, but I would argue most people just would go to books, right? And they're probably looking for the newest books, so they would go there. Were cascading menus even a thing back then? So that's a great question. I wouldn't be surprised if they weren't, or I would be surprised if they weren't. But again, you're thinking about at that time, everyone was browsing the internet or browsing a web page from a computer. There was no mobile browsing, so you didn't have to make everything compact the same way. But there's probably some people that were on the cutting edge of figuring things like that out. Zartasha says poorly organized. Yeah, I mean, I would be curious to hear why you think that. I think at the time it's pretty well organized. I think it's information overload, right? Like I don't necessarily need to know about the movers and shakers, me personally. But if you think about it, like this would be what people not only would want to know, like to purchase, but eventually, you'd start selling things from Amazon, right? So it would be good to know like what is marketable. But at that time, you weren't doing that. Drago says, I think maybe because there's a lot of information that fills your screen almost completely, but it seems quite organized and properly placed. Yes, it was very intentional. And not that intentionality has gone out the window, but there's very limited tool set at this point, right? So again, you had to optimize for internet speeds, but you really had to optimize for users that, you weren't spending all day on a computer, right? So I can speak from experience. You'd get on, do the thing you need to do, then get off. Whereas now the internet's more, ambient, right? It's everywhere. So that's where people are trying to like capture your attention to keep you on because they know you're going to be on. Whereas here, you just boom, hey, we want to get you the stuff that you want because we know you're not going to be spending all day on here. Mohammed said, yeah, exactly. You can't put images everywhere because it wouldn't load. Perfect. Okay. So let's make sure we fill out this here, right? Make sure you do your submit answer. And then let's go to the Macromedia Flash contest. Yeah, Macromedia Flash that takes me back. I'm a huge Homestar Runner fan, if anyone's familiar. Yeah, those were the days for sure. I mean, you had to wait forever for something to load, but it was usually worth it. Oops, I clicked twice. All right, so let's look at 2009. I'll make this I'm going to zoom out a little bit so we can get a better, there we go. Perfect. So what are we noticing here, right? Let's look at 2000 to 2009, roughly a decade of changes. What's the first thing we're noticing here? Shiny buttons. Yes. Definitely more emphasis placed on the design portion, right? If we open this up in a new browser window, whoa, that's just a lot of white space there. Anyway, let's hit inspect. See, we're still not quite mobile friendly, right? But you notice here at 768, not too bad. But again, the goal wasn't to really get people browsing on their phones yet. We see more colors, more clear images, a little bit more consistency on the design. Exactly. So we see there's a lot of this orange color, whether it's this hello, right, or free 2-day shipping, things that they want to call attention to, is highlighted with this orange. The links are still blue, right? But that's standard. You'll notice here too, right? These little carrots to signify it's like a call to action, right? They want you to click these things. Let's see, less and well-organized tabs at the top. Yeah, a lot less tabs. What else do we have? User-friendly with advanced search, detailed product listings. Yep. Dario said, we need to keep in mind that monitors have different ratios, so probably why the page is spread out everywhere and they're the empty spaces on the screen. Yeah, exactly. And we'll learn about that when we get into responsive design. I just was surprised at the amount of white space there on the side. So what's interesting here is I'm going to hit back, right? So we saw when we were on the home page. Let's go back here. So on the home page, we had like the movers and shakers, right? Things that are starting to garner more attention. In the books section, our bestsellers updated hourly, right? There wasn't a whole lot of description here. But then we go here and look at what it's doing. Not only is it telling you what books are in the top 100, that's crazy, but it tells you how many days. It gives you a snapshot of what the book is. It also tells you how much the price is, right? That right there, we're starting to see the way that they've figured out how to make a business or keep the business going. As we all know, sale prices, it's all marketing, right? But you see here, I mean, $8.24 instead of $14.99. Yeah, that's a pretty good deal. $30 instead of $55.93. Oh yeah, like I really want that, and they're doing that. And not only that, but they're showing you like, hey, this book is going up, right? So that's something to keep in mind, is they're really starting to get into the sales side of things here compared to just displaying information. Let's see. So there's one-click purchase option. Not at this point. So what we have is we have look inside, which would give you the option to preview. But at least not here on this page. We don't have that one-click option. Yeah, that really, Amazon doing that is it's dangerous. I'll put it that way. So Dragos mentioned different fonts used for better visibility. Overall design has a cleaner, more organized look. Exactly. So we've seen that they put a lot more time and attention into the design work, which is important. We're at the point now where the internet is more prevalent. It's more, like I mentioned, it's more ambient. It's all around us. So it's not just for niche things. Everything's starting to happen on the internet at this point, or the World Wide Web, excuse me. So in question 2, what new features or elements were introduced by 2009, right? So how are they reflecting those new trends as we started getting into, 2010 and forward? So I'll notice something here is there's really more call to actions for signing up, right? And I only say that because they're assuming you're on the website because you want to purchase something, and they're going to make it very easy to sign up, right? You're not going to have to hunt around. I remember not even that long ago where it just felt like for most websites, you just have to like figure out how to create an account, because that wasn't always front and center. Now that's every website has an account that you can sign up for, right? I'm surprised if I go to any website and they don't have some sort of profile or account for you. So that's the first thing I noticed, is really the call to actions all over the place, whether it's to sign up, these little orange carrots, like I mentioned, it's trying to get you to read the editor's blog. And we know what's going to happen there is the editor's blog is they're writing this to get you to buy things. And then as you scroll down too, look at this, right? They're starting to make it more clear what these bargain books are. Maybe you're not interested in any of those books, but oh yeah, books under $5, cool, I've got some money to spend. So what else are we noticing here? Like the newer features. I know we've covered a few of like the font and everything, but what else are we seeing here? International shopping. Yes. Their infrastructure was set up where, well, now it's not just relegated to the United States. All the articles have an image. Yeah, images are more prevalent. And not only that, but look here, 40% off, 46% off. Again, they don't have to have the text to display things now, right? They have this little button here, or little icon to be like, hey, this book's cheaper, you should look into it. They can do it here, right? But when it's more important to say less, they just slap that icon on there and they're good to go. Exactly. It's not as obvious. And that's the point, right? Is being able to have images in a more accessible way, they can make it more front and center. Something I noticed too is we had mentioned it before, but the look inside, right? They call that out where some of these books have demos, right? You can go in and read a few pages. So they're calling that out more because they don't have to worry about the images rendering the same way that they did back in 2000. All right. So, and then number 3, let's talk about it. So from a user experience, search functionality, navigation, I think we've talked about the design a lot, but what do you think? Like if if you did use Amazon back then, can you think back to how the website worked, or thinking now, if you were back then, like, do you think this website's well structured for users, or do you think it's still not as easy to navigate as what we have currently? Yeah, the search bar is pretty hidden, right? It's not as prevalent. You're absolutely right. You know, you could shop all departments, you can go through and browse, right? Um, and a lot of that has to do with, so let's see if this will load for me again. So even on the homepage, right, it's not really there. They really want you to just click through. That would be my assumption, right? Is, again, we're starting to get to the point where, well, if we can keep people on our site, they're probably going to buy more. So why not just let them look around, right? Surely they'll find something, instead of giving people the option to search and find exactly what they want. We have that now, but I think we can all speak from experience. You search for something, you see a lot of other things that aren't what you're looking for, sponsored posts or sponsored listings, right? So they found a way to give people the search functionality, but still capitalize on attention, which is a very normal development philosophy these days. All right, let's see some more typing in the chat here. They improved the copy. Yeah, I love that you called that out, right? This is something that maybe wouldn't pass today's muster, but the marketing's pretty good. You know, it's effective, it's simple. You can say more with less, right? So that's a great call out. You know, it's not even selling this particular computer, but it's enough to be like, oh yeah, maybe I should look into that. The visualization of that computer on top of a book, I mean, I would say that's pretty effective. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit up the final page here. 2019. Man, Wayback Machine is struggling today. That or it's my internet, I don't know. I think it says something now, and we can talk about it. The fact that it took this long to load, right? Yeah, so I mean, this is pretty similar to what we're seeing now, right? And I think what we'll do too is, after we do this, we can compare it with the current design. But looking here, I mean, in the description, it talks about being user-centered, responsive interfaces, right? So let's open that up in the new window here. And I think part of this is with the Wayback Machine, it's not going to be 100% optimized, but imagine you are on a cellular device, right? This is really designed for mobile devices in mind, assuming that you don't have the app installed at this point, right? That's the one thing that they're hoping for, is that you have the app installed. But if you don't, everything is designed in this grid, right? So we have this header image, we have these very organized, consistent columns here, rows, ideally so that when you go on a device, everything will fold up the way that it needs to be. So the goal is definitely focused on, how do we make this as seamless and frictionless a process as possible. As Artasha mentioned, the one-click option is available. Not necessarily on this screen, but yes, it is 100% available at this point. Let's see if the Wayback Machine will let me do this. It will not let me do it on this one. But yeah, we would have seen the one-click option at this point to really capitalize on people spending time on the site. So let's look here, right? So we notice the responsive, the way the website's laid out, everything is an image, right? All the text for the most part is an image. Even this here, this books at Amazon is an image. You know, this here isn't, right? But everything is focused on capturing your attention compared to just laying out the information. It's very responsive too in regards to your carousel here, right? As you can click through and view different books without necessarily having to go to a new page, right? As they make everything as accessible as possible. Why? Let's see. Why would they put an image with text? That's a great question. I'm not 100% sure. I would like to know. There's a lot of times I'd like to know why people do the things they do, but in this instance, they used an image. Joseph said all the image visuals are very catchy. Yes, it's well designed. Let's see if it'll let us. Oh, I did not mean to. Let's try to open it up in a new window. Let's see if it'll let me inspect this. So I'll zoom back in. So the actual image itself, if you notice, you know, it's got like this overlay here with the text, right? So that's actually how they designed the image. It's not no CSS. They purposely designed that in advance. But again, they can say what they need to say with very few words. But look at this though, like award winners, it's got, I'd assume, a cup of tea, some flowers, a book, like it doesn't scream award winner, but it's enough to catch your attention, right? Deals in books, it's just an open book. You know, so I assume they would have spent a lot of time with user testing with different images to see what would capture more engagement with their website. Dragos mentioned overall design seems to be more linear. Yes, so thumbnails, they're consistent sizing. The page spacing is much better. Yep, you're going to notice the margins between these images are consistent. The margins between the sections are going to be consistent. So this is where they definitely have a dedicated UI UX team. So let's talk about number 2 then. So discussing how modern web technologies have been utilized to improve this website. And even if we're not super familiar with how they did it, I think we can still see what these features are, right? So how do we think making it more mobile responsive, having a more streamlined design, like what do you think this did for the user experience? And not just, let's think deeper than just making it more easy to use. What do we think in concrete terms, how this would have affected the user experience? Made them stay longer in the website by creating a nicer UX. Yes. I cannot stress how important that is, right? Is if you have a website that is poorly designed, people aren't going to want to stick around. You know, it's if anyone's done any online dating, I met my wife on an online dating site. You're gonna have a quick look. If the pictures don't attract you, the description doesn't attract you, you move on, right? You're not just gonna keep looking. So yes, making it appealing to view, you're gonna keep people on your website longer. That's 100% true. Tatiana mentioned users are going to go for what they want, right? So search bar is the main point of the website. Eyes go directly to it. The images are what sells the most. Yeah, and at this point, they're probably updating those images pretty often. We're starting to get into more targeted experiences, right? So you may see something on this page that no one else sees because they're starting to collect data and develop accordingly. So more captivating than before, a lot of call to actions, absolutely. Yeah, using images to say something instead of just relying on text. If we go back, actually, click the wrong thing. What I'll show you here too is even though these images have the text overlaid, like the actual image, the important thing to know is if we select this here, we're going to have some alt text. Okay, so it says award winners. This one here will probably say deals and books. If I go to the images, deals and books. So even though the image, like a screen reader may not be able to view the image, that alt text is still going to help people see, oh, that's what this link is. It'll read it out to them, right? And then they can still click. It'll help with SEO. So they know even if there's not actual text elements there, they're still covering their bases with accessibility. Yeah, Joseph, I have no idea what that is, but yeah, bless you. I do think the really important thing to understand here too, for the overall experience is you start to open it up to people from different walks of life, right? Someone who spends all day on the internet, they know how to use this website. And then someone who's never really browsed the internet and they're like, hey, you should buy a book from Amazon. They make it pretty frictionless, right? Is you can go on here and yeah, there's a lot of information, but it's going to be very easy to figure out where you need to go. Okay, so on our last question here, let's think about from 2000 to 2019. Where do we see this design lining up with how Amazon is trying to market themselves as a company? Right, in the beginning, it was mostly focused on books. Now, I mean, we're on the books page, but like Amazon has become a household name. It's a lifestyle store, right? Anything you can think of, you can buy on here. I mean, I have bought car parts from Amazon to fix my wife's vehicle, right? So do we see this? Like, how do we see this design lining up with how Amazon wants people to perceive them? Yep, branding colors very clear, right? We still see the orange from before, the white, the blue, right? And they know when to, like the prime colors, it's a very specific shade of blue there. Absolutely. I'm sure y'all are aware of this, obviously working at Amazon, but like they want you to make this a part of your life. Hey guys, hey everyone, Prime Day, it's coming up. Like it's something that people put on their calendars. You will move things around in your life for Prime Day. It's surreal. So from A to Z, Amazon has it all. Yes, absolutely. It is, they have everything you can think of. Introduction of subscriptions to cut down prices. Yep, it's not just Amazon Prime, but you can start ordering things and having it on a rotation. So you can save money and then they keep getting your money. And then people can post reviews. Yeah, so reviews have always been a thing, but this has become such a prominent part, right? And that's where you see it from a marketing standpoint. You sell something, 9 times out of 10, they're gonna be like, well, check out our Amazon reviews. They don't even direct you to their own website. They're saying go to Amazon and look. Even if you don't purchase the item from Amazon, they still want you to go to Amazon to look at the reviews, right? So that's huge. That is a very big part of how Amazon has developed that perception of not just selling things, right? But it's a one-stop shop of They want to be a source of truth about things that you should or shouldn't buy. Oh, wow. Not allowed to paint walls in Amazon on colors that are not standard branding color. That's crazy. I didn't know that. Getting users on the website to get everything in one place. Yep, absolutely. They really want to focus that attention. Again, that's how Amazon has developed themselves, is being a very holistic place of you work here, you buy here, you sell here, right? You can sell things on Amazon now. But Joseph's right. I mean, this is really trying to be as streamlined and as easy to use for the customer as possible. Absolutely. So the next part we're going to go over just for a few minutes before we close here. So let's look at the current Amazon design, like we talked about, right? So we'll click here on the main Amazon link if it'll let me go there. So we see it's pretty well designed, right? We have a big image here. It tells you to sign in. You've got this handy nav bar up here. And then we move here. And what are we noticing, right? We're noticing animations, right? We're noticing a lot right off the bat compared to this page where, I mean, there's still a good amount of items, right? But, whew, I mean, I'm overwhelmed by seeing all of this. If we go into the mobile responsive view, which is the actual live website, we can start seeing the way that everything's moving based on the viewport, right? So this is something that what's interesting is it's not fully optimized actually for mobile devices, but we talked about that. They want you to be on your app. So if they make the website good on mobile, you're probably not going to use the app, right? So they really want to drive you to that application. Yes, I like Metroid. My kids loved watching me play Metroid Prime, so I was looking to get the trilogy. But the big thing again is they don't have like any text here. It's all just thumbnails, 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 right? And because they assume that you're going to see something and know what it is, or you're going to see something and be interested, right? So I'm looking here at these different albums. Like I don't recognize. Oh, yeah, I don't know who that is. I know who that is, right? So they don't want to tell me anything because they want me to click through. Same thing with books, right? So, but everything is very image driven, more so than before, because like Aaron mentioned here, we understand images faster than text. So there's going to be that engagement in a way where someone's like, "Ooh, what's that?" Right? It's not just understanding, but it's going to attract in a different way than text because we have to take the time to read the text. So Diego, that's perfect. Anyone can buy there because you don't need to understand English, right? Like you're gonna look at an image and you're gonna know what it is. You don't necessarily have to know. Come on, don't do that to me. You're not gonna have to know English to look at this and be like, oh, that's an interesting book, right? Or hey, my lizard could use something like this. That is a great call out. Okay. So we're at the end for today, but we're not quite done. We're gonna go over a few things here, but really the big thing that we want to understand as we close up today, understanding how to develop a growth mindset. Okay. Like I said earlier, the goal here is not to have you memorize 100% of what we went over today. I can tell you from experience, I'm not always like the way we conflate the World Wide Web and the internet. Not having that fully fleshed out, that didn't stop me from getting a development job, right? It's good to know, but that's not something you 100% have to have because everyone makes that mistake. So what's important is, like it says here in the second paragraph, learning how to embrace challenges, learning how to learn from mistakes, knowing that every obstacle we face is a chance to grow. That is what's going to set you apart as a software engineer. At the company I work for, we have what are called block behaviors, things that more than just technical skills, who you are as a person, these are things that we want to see from every employee. One of them is resiliency. So how do you press in when there's a problem? How do you not give up? Or how do you know how to walk away for a while and then come back, right? So learning how to do these things, that's just as important as learning the technical skills. So don't be afraid to break things. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Learning how to break things actually is a great skill. It's something that as a web developer, I have become very good at is, hey, how do I test this thing to break it before we put it in front of people, right? But having that curious nature too, of whenever we see something here in our lessons, before you ask, well, hey, what would happen if you do this? Before you ask that, just try it, see what happens. You're not going to break anything in here to the point of like being irreparable, right? Just try it out, see what happens. I guarantee having that mindset is going to help you out a lot. So before we close here, we wanted to open this up for next 10-15 minutes. If you have any questions, whether it's about this session or web development in general, let's go ahead and ask. This is a good time for that. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and end. But we wanted to at least open that up for this opportunity since this is a little bit less content heavy of a lesson. So what questions do we have? Actually, before we do that, I see Mohammed mentioned on Amazon. Yeah, so being able to pick up where you left off. It's less of an algorithm. It's more about what we'll learn as state management. But yes, that's a very big thing of, hey, you did something and then you come back and you're like, oh, hey, it's all still there. It's great for them, not so much for my wallet. So I would agree with that. If we don't have any questions, that's fine too. Veronica, actually, do you have anything? If we don't have any questions, would you mind sharing some advice as well? I don't know if you did that yesterday, but especially since you've been here for a few cohorts, I feel like that would be really invaluable as well.
Sure, yeah. We did go over a little bit of some advice and as well some just things to think about while you're here. But most importantly, I think what we spoke about yesterday, which was your ability to be proactive with your communication is really helpful in this program. Just making sure you let us know what's going on with you. Because at the end of the day, like we really want you guys to finish this program. Like we're here for you to finish your program. Like if you don't finish your program, it's definitely on you because we want you to finish. And we will also like extend ourselves to certain, like, you know, if you can't for whatever reason not turn a project in at a specific time, you can always talk to me and let me know. And I can, you know, make the arrangements for you to have an extension on the project. I can grade it later and all sorts of different things. So most importantly is being proactive with your communication. And then other than that, like David said, this is a really good time for you all to try things out. Like you're not going to break anything here, right? Like no one's going to be mad if your project doesn't work except for you. And it happens, you know, sometimes there's been times where I've done this before, you know, I've done everything and then maybe something on GitHub didn't work well and now all my stuff is lost. Like that's happened to me before. But you learn from that mistake, like you learn from what you did wrong and the mistakes you made in order for you to improve. And this is a perfect opportunity for you to do so. Like if you don't know what it's going to do, like just try it out. Like nothing's going to happen to the project. I wouldn't, the one thing I suggest is if you are afraid of like potentially deleting stuff, I just like copy paste it somewhere else or something, you know, like that's not a big deal, and then copy paste it back. But other than that, those two things, putting in the time afterwards is very important. We are here 7.5 hours. Actually, this cohort gets a little bit more extra time. The other ones were shorter with just 2 hours. So we get a little bit more live session, which is good because you get to ask us maybe more questions that the other cohorts didn't get to. But after the class is over, I would really suggest you all go and take a look at what you learned, or do it the opposite way around. I think Ivan mentioned this before, doing it before, so you kind of have an idea of what's going to come up, or at least it's in your brain in some way. And then when it pops up and David is going through it, or Wes, our other lead instructor, is going through it, you're like, oh yeah, like that sounds familiar because I've seen it before. So that's really helpful. And then just going over the content afterwards. If you didn't understand something, put in the time to try to go find some documentation, or maybe watch a YouTube video. Or if you already did those two things and you didn't get it, like, you know, always come to me and ask me the question, or even whoever is available to answer you. There might be somebody who already understood it, right, within our cohort ourselves. So look for support in all different sorts of avenues, right? We might not always have the answer, but there's somebody out there with the answer. And the great thing about software development is you don't have to memorize things, guys. Like, it's not a memorization game. We don't memorize almost anything unless it's like one of those things where it's like, okay, it's easy to memorize it just to make things faster. But the stuff is online for a reason. If you don't know how to do something, it's online. And as a software developer, when you work in that space, you probably will still go and look stuff up. Like, it's not something you're supposed to memorize and know and have in your brain, right? But those are pretty much the only things that I have for ensuring that you make it through. And the other thing, lastly, would be just make sure you have some kind of support system. If it's you alone, maybe you have a friend that's not around, but they're, you know, far away or something. Just have them like talk to you. Like, you need someone around to help you through the process, because it can get a little bit tough. The first few lessons, I would say the first month's going to be kind of easy. We have HTML, we have CSS. It's kind of easy to understand that stuff. It's not super, super hard. I think everyone here has a capacity to do that pretty easily. But once we get to JavaScript, that's when things get a little bit harder with the concepts. That's when things get like hard to understand. So it's nice to have that support system and have someone you can even, like I mentioned before, go over the content with, even if it's just your friend listening to what you learned. It's good to have like that process of like saying all the information you learned back to somebody, or writing it down, or something of that sort. I necessarily wouldn't say you need notes. Like I said, I don't know if you think otherwise, David, but I feel like it depends. But I wouldn't really make it a big deal if you miss something in the lecture. Also, the lectures are recorded. You can always go watch them again. Yep, that's all.
I love that you said it depends, because I mean, especially the first cohort, right? Like, that was the mantra, is everyone would ask a question, and then 9 times out of 10, it depends. Now, usually there's something after that, but yeah, with notes, at least, that actually ties into something I was thinking about. So I don't know who all here changes their own oil for their cars. I do now, because I was tired of paying way too much for someone else to do it. But like, I don't have everything memorized in regards to how I change my oil or my wife's car, right? So I don't always remember what socket size I need. I don't always remember the filter sizes I need. So what I do is, I know how to do it, right? I know I need to jack the car up. I know I need to undo the top oil gasket right on top. I know I need to remove certain things in a certain order. I don't always remember the socket size. I don't remember the filter size. So I'll look that up before I go to the store. I'll bring my socket set underneath, and I'll make sure I remember, which now I remember it's a 14 millimeter for my car. after I've done it 5 or 6 times. But the point is, like, I know the main ideas, right? I've done it enough where I'm familiar with the process, but I don't have all of the particulars memorized. But it doesn't mean I can't change the oil, right? It just means that after I do it so many times, eventually I'll have those things. It's just ingrained. But it doesn't come from studying, right? It doesn't come from just sitting and reading a book about how to change the oil. It comes from doing it. So less important than notes, in my opinion. Like, I think notes are really important. I took a lot of notes when I did my boot camp, but I didn't really start learning it until my fingers got on the keyboard and I started working. Until I started actually like using a pencil and pen and designing out my applications. That was actually really helpful for me, is drawing everything out and writing what I wanted to do. Right. Something I've learned is you can't solve a problem until you can explain what the problem is, which we'll get into that more later. So, but to reiterate what Veronica just said, really don't worry about the rote memorization where you have everything just nailed down, where you could rattle it all off. Just get familiar with knowing what problem you're trying to solve, and then knowing how to search for the solution, right? It's very rare that you're going to come across something that someone else hasn't already done. So learning how to problem solve is the biggest thing, in my opinion. But outside of that, I mean, I think we've covered everything for this lesson. If you do have any questions, like Veronica said, like, please utilize her. She was a head TA for the last 2 cohorts. I had to utilize her so much. So like, you all are in great hands in that regard. But we do have the couple different channels as well, like resources. If you have any questions, you can use the general chat as well. But as we go over things, like, you'll see whether it's Veronica, myself, Wes, Yvonne, we'll share stuff in the resources channel too. But if you find anything that's really helpful, really encourage you to share that for the other fellows as well. But yeah, if you have any questions, please utilize Veronica, utilize Yvonne, utilize everybody, and we're happy to help however we can. And really excited to see how the next few courses go.